The cargo bay of the UES Liberty hummed with nervous energy as the crew stood in perfect formation. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Murphy adjusted her uniform one last time and checked her watch. The Zephyrian inspection team would arrive in less than 5 minutes, and everyone knew what that meant. Another round of insults, another display of alien superiority, another reminder that humans were still considered the weakest species in the Galactic Council. Captain Jake Morrison paced back and forth in front of his crew, his boots clicking against the metal floor. He had been through dozens of these inspections over the past 3 years, and they never got easier. The Zephyrians always found something to criticize, something to use as an excuse to demonstrate their power over the human vessels that dared to explore their section of space. "Remember," Morrison said quietly, "we follow protocol. No matter what they say or do, we stay professional. We are representatives of Earth, and we will not give them any excuse to escalate this situation." Murphy nodded along with the rest of the crew, but she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with forced submission. She had spent 12 years in the Navy SEALs before joining the Space Service, and every instinct in her body screamed against standing still while bullies pushed her people around. But orders were orders, and the peace treaty with the Zephyrians was more important than her personal feelings. The docking bay doors hissed open, and the inspection team marched through in perfect military formation. The Zephyrians were impressive creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall with thick, scaled skin that ranged from deep green to brown. Their eyes were yellow and cold, and their movements had the predatory grace of natural hunters. At their head walked Commander Vexter, whose scarred face and battle-worn armor marked him as a veteran of many conflicts. Vexter surveyed the human crew with obvious disgust. His yellow eyes moved from person to person, taking in their smaller stature and soft skin with the same expression someone might use when examining insects. When his gaze reached Murphy, he paused for a moment, and she saw something calculating in his expression. "Humans," Vexler said, his voice carrying a hissing quality that made the translator work harder to process his words. "Still pretending to be explorers, I see. Still hiding behind your council protection like children behind their parents." Captain Morrison stepped forward and saluted. "Commander Vexter, welcome aboard the UES Liberty. We are prepared for your inspection and will provide full cooperation with your team." Vexter did not return the salute. Instead, he walked slowly around Morrison, examining him like a piece of equipment. "Full cooperation. How generous of you, Captain, as if you have any choice in the matter." The inspection began in the engine room, where Vexler's team poked and prodded at the human technology with barely concealed contempt. They made notes on their portable devices, speaking to each other in their own language while occasionally making loud comments about human primitive engineering and inefficient designs. Murphy followed the inspection team as they moved through the ship, providing technical explanations when requested and maintaining her professional demeanor despite the constant stream of insults. She had dealt with worse during her military service, but something about the Zephyrian attitude bothered her more than usual. It was not just arrogance, it was a systematic attempt to break down human confidence and self-worth. The inspection moved to the bridge, where Vexler spent considerable time examining the navigation systems and communication equipment. He questioned every decision, criticized every design choice, and made it clear that he considered human technology to be barely functional. Captain Morrison answered each question with patience and professionalism, but Murphy could see the strain in his eyes. "Your defensive systems are particularly pathetic," Vexler announced as they moved toward the medical bay. "How do you expect to survive in real space with such weak weapons?" "We rely on diplomacy and council protection," Morrison replied. "The Liberty is an exploration vessel, not a warship." Vexler laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Diplomacy. The last refuge of the weak. In real space, Captain, only strength matters. Your species has forgotten this basic truth." When they reached the medical bay, Murphy stepped forward to begin her presentation. This was her domain, the place where she felt most confident and competent. She had designed many of the medical protocols herself, and the equipment was some of the most advanced in the human fleet. Our medical facilities are designed to handle both human and alien physiology, Murphy began, gesturing to the various scanning devices and treatment units. We have comprehensive databases on over 200 species, including detailed treatment protocols for Zephyrian biology. Vexler moved closer to examine the medical equipment, his massive form casting a shadow over Murphy. You presume to understand Zephyrian biology? Your species has barely mastered your own primitive medicine. Murphy maintained her professional tone. Actually, Commander, human medical science has made significant advances in recent years. Our understanding of pain management, for example, has improved dramatically. We have developed techniques that can target specific neural pathways in most known species. Pain management, Vexler repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. How very human. Always trying to avoid discomfort instead of embracing it as a teacher. Murphy felt a flash of irritation but kept her voice steady. Pain serves a purpose as a warning system, but unnecessary suffering serves no biological function. Our research has shown that controlled pain management actually improves healing rates and reduces recovery time. Vexler turned to face her, directly, his yellow eyes narrowing. You dare to lecture me about pain, human? You soft, weak creatures who have never known real hardship? I was simply correcting a misconception about our medical capabilities, Murphy replied calmly. The research data clearly shows that effective pain management improves patient outcomes across all tested species. The medical bay fell silent. Every human in the room held their breath, recognizing the dangerous shift in the alien commander's posture. Vexler's hands clenched into fists, and the scales along his neck darkened with anger. Correcting me? Vexler's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the promise of violence. You think you can correct me, you pathetic little creature? Murphy realized her mistake too late. In her professional pride, she had forgotten the cardinal rule of dealing with Zephyrians: never challenge their authority, never suggest they might be wrong, and never ever show them up in front of their subordinates. Before she could respond, Vexler's massive hand struck her across the face with enough force to send her stumbling backward. The blow was calculated, designed to humiliate rather than seriously injure, but it was followed immediately by a powerful shove that sent Murphy crashing into a bank of medical equipment. The impact drove the breath from her lungs as she hit the floor, hard medical supplies scattering around her. A sharp edge had cut her forehead, and she could feel warm blood trickling down her face as she struggled to regain her footing. The other humans in the medical bay tensed, ready to intervene. But Captain Morrison's sharp gesture kept them in place. Any retaliation would be considered an act of war, and the consequences would fall on all of humanity. Murphy slowly pushed herself to her feet, wiping blood from her eyes. Her body ached from the impact, but her mind was crystal clear. She looked directly at Vexler, who was watching her with satisfaction. Expecting to see fear or submission in her eyes, instead she simply asked, "Inspection complete, Commander?" Vexler smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Not yet, human. We have much more to examine." As the inspection team moved on to the next section of the ship, Murphy remained in the medical bay, ostensibly to treat her injuries, but her mind was already working on something else entirely. Something that would change the balance of power in ways that Vexler could never imagine. Murphy walked slowly to her quarters, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The cut on her forehead had stopped bleeding, but she could feel the bruise forming along her jaw where Vexler had struck her. To anyone watching, she looked like a defeated officer retreating to lick her wounds. But Murphy had not survived 12 years in the SEALs. By giving up after the first hit, she entered her quarters and locked the door behind her. The small room was spartanly furnished with just a bed, a desk, and a few personal items. But Murphy was not interested in comfort right now. She moved directly to her personal terminal and began typing in a series of codes that most people on the ship did not even know existed. The screen flickered and changed, displaying a classified menu that required the highest level of security. Clearance. Murphy entered her biometric data and waited as the system scanned her retina and analyzed her DNA. After a few seconds, the words "Access Granted" appeared on the screen. Murphy scrolled through the classified files until she found what she was looking for. The Murphy Protocol, named after her grandfather, Colonel Patrick Murphy, who had developed it during the resource wars of 2157. The old soldier had understood something that most modern humans had forgotten. Sometimes the only way to maintain peace was to remind your enemies why they should fear you. She opened the file and began reading the familiar words. The Murphy Protocol was not just a military doctrine, it was a philosophy. It stated that humans were apex predators who had spent millions of years perfecting the art of warfare, and that their peaceful exploration of space was a choice, not a weakness. When that choice was threatened, the protocol provided a framework for responding with overwhelming force. Murphy had never expected to use the protocol during her time in the space service. The diplomatic missions were supposed to be safe, routine affairs where the biggest danger was boredom. But Vexler had made a critical error when he chose to physically assault a human officer. He had mistaken restraint for weakness, and that mistake was about to cost him everything. She began accessing the ship's medical database, cross-referencing information about Zephyrian physiology with human combat techniques. The medical scanner had given her detailed information about Vexler's body structure during the inspection, and she was now using that data to identify weak points and vulnerabilities. Zephyrians were strong and tough, but they had several biological weaknesses that most species did not know about. Their scaled skin was nearly impervious to blunt force trauma, but it was vulnerable to precise pressure applied to specific nerve clusters. Their eyes were adapted for low-light conditions, making them extremely sensitive to sudden bright lights. And their respiratory system, while efficient, had a critical vulnerability that could be exploited by someone with the right knowledge. Murphy stood up from her terminal and moved to her personal storage locker. Inside, hidden behind her civilian clothes, was a small case that contained items she had hoped never to use again. The case was unmarked and appeared to contain nothing more than basic personal hygiene supplies. But Murphy knew better. She opened the case and carefully examined its contents. A small vial of clear liquid that looked like water, but was actually a powerful sedative designed to work on reptilian nervous systems. A pen-shaped device that appeared to be a medical scanner but was actually a precisely calibrated sonic disruptor. A small tube of what looked like antibiotic cream, but was actually a topical neurotoxin that could cause temporary paralysis. These items were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were tools that had been designed to look like innocent medical supplies while serving a much more dangerous purpose. Murphy had carried them with her as a last resort. Never expecting to need them during a routine diplomatic mission, she closed the case and returned to her terminal. The next phase of her plan required access to the ship's computer systems, and she would need to be very careful not to trigger any security protocols that might alert Captain Morrison or the bridge crew. Murphy began typing in a series of commands that would give her access to the ship's environmental controls. She had learned these codes during her orientation, when she was being trained on the medical bay's life support systems. But the same access that allowed her to control the air filtration in the medical bay also gave her limited control over other parts of the ship. She programmed a series of minor adjustments to the lighting and air circulation systems throughout the ship. To anyone monitoring the systems, the changes would appear to be routine maintenance protocols. But Murphy knew that these seemingly innocent adjustments would create the perfect conditions for what she was planning. The lighting in the corridors would be slightly dimmer than normal, making it harder for the Zephyrians to see clearly. The air circulation would be adjusted to carry certain scents more effectively, including the pheromones that would help her track the alien inspection team through the ship. And the temperature would be lowered by just a few degrees, making the cold-blooded Zephyrians slightly slower and less alert. Murphy then accessed the ship's communication systems and began programming a series of false routine announcements. Medical personnel would be called to various parts of the ship for seemingly urgent but actually fabricated emergencies. This would give her crew members legitimate reasons to be in position throughout the ship, Ready to assist her when the time came, she stood up from her terminal and moved to her mirror, examining the cut on her forehead. It was not deep, but it was bleeding enough to look worse than it actually was. Murphy smiled grimly. Vexler had given her the perfect excuse to be covered in blood. When the time came for their final confrontation, Murphy opened her personal communicator and sent a coded message to 3 members of her medical team. The message appeared to be a routine request for assistance with inventory management, but the 3 officers would recognize the hidden meaning. They were all former military personnel who had served with Murphy during her SEAL days, and they would understand that she was calling them to action. Within minutes, her communicator chimed with 3 brief replies. Each message appeared to be a simple acknowledgement of her inventory request. But Murphy could read the real meaning. Her team was ready and waiting for orders. She took a deep breath and began changing into a fresh uniform. The blood-stained medical coat would be useful later, but for now she needed to appear professional and composed. She checked her appearance in the mirror one last time, making sure that the cut on her forehead was still visible but not alarming. Murphy opened her door and stepped back into the corridor. To anyone watching, she looked like a dedicated officer, returning to duty after treating a minor injury. But inside, she was already planning the systematic destruction of Commander Vexler's superiority complex. She walked toward the medical bay, where she knew the inspection team would return eventually. Vexler would want to finish his examination of the human medical facilities, partly out of professional duty and partly because he had enjoyed humiliating her in front of her own crew. As Murphy walked through the corridors, she noticed that her environmental adjustments were already taking effect. The lighting was slightly dimmer, and she could see that the Zephyrian guards were moving a bit more slowly than before. They had not noticed the changes yet, but their bodies were already responding to the subtle alterations in their environment. Murphy entered the medical bay and began preparing for the next phase of her plan. She arranged her medical supplies in specific patterns, placing certain items within easy reach while hiding others in strategic locations. To anyone watching, she was simply organizing her workspace after the disruption caused by her earlier collision with the equipment, but Murphy was actually preparing a battlefield. Every item in the medical bay could be used as a weapon if necessary, and she was positioning them for maximum effectiveness. The Zephyrians would never suspect that the woman they had just humiliated was about to demonstrate why humans had become the apex predators of their homeworld. She activated her personal communicator and sent a final message to her team. The message was simple: medical drill in progress. Stand by for emergency protocols. Murphy smiled as she looked around the medical bay. Vexler had made the mistake of thinking that human restraint was the same as human weakness. He was about to learn the difference. Murphy stood in the medical bay, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she organized her supplies. The cut on her forehead had scabbed over, but she made sure it remained visible. She wanted Vexler to see the evidence of his earlier assault when he returned. It would remind him of his perceived victory, making him careless and overconfident. The inspection team had moved to the engineering section, where she could hear Vexler's voice echoing through the ship's corridors. As he continued his verbal assault on the human crew, his tone had grown more aggressive since their encounter in the medical bay, as if her submission had emboldened him to push harder. Murphy's personal communicator buzzed softly. She glanced at the message and smiled. It was from Petty Officer Steve Collins, one of her former SEAL teammates who now served as a medical technician. The message was simple: package delivered to Destination Alpha. Collins had successfully placed the first of several strategic supplies throughout the ship. To anyone watching, he was simply restocking medical emergency stations as part of routine maintenance. But Murphy knew that each medical supply was actually a carefully chosen tool for what was to come. A few minutes later, another message arrived from Hospital Corpsman Lisa Park. Equipment check complete in Sector 7. Park had finished her assignment as well, positioning herself near the main corridor where the inspection team would have to pass. Her job was to ensure that certain members of Vexler's security detail would be temporarily delayed when the time came. The third message came from Chief Medical Officer Danny Wright. diagnostic systems online and ready for testing. Right. Had taken control of the ship's medical monitoring systems and was ready to provide Murphy with real-time biological data on the Zephyrian inspection team. Knowing their heart rates, stress levels, and physical condition would give her a significant tactical advantage. Murphy moved to her medical terminal and began pulling up detailed files on Zephyrian psychology and behavior patterns. She had studied these files during her initial training, but now she was looking for specific weaknesses she could exploit. The Zephyrians were proud warriors who valued strength above all else, but that pride could be turned against them if handled correctly. She found what she was looking for in a classified intelligence report from the first human contact with the Zephyrian military. The report noted that Zephyrian commanders were extremely sensitive to challenges to their authority, especially in front of their subordinates. They would go to great lengths to maintain their reputation for dominance, even if it meant taking unnecessary risks. Murphy began formulating her approach. She would need to draw Vexter away from his security detail, isolate him in a controlled environment, and then systematically demonstrate the flaws in his understanding of human nature. But she would have to be careful not to push too hard too fast, or he might call for reinforcements before she could complete her lesson. The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor announced the return of the inspection team. Murphy quickly closed her terminal and assumed a professional posture near the main medical console. She could hear Vexter's voice getting closer, still making disparaging comments about human engineering and technology. "The propulsion systems are barely functional," Vexter was saying to one of his subordinates. "I am amazed these primitives can even maintain orbit around their own planet." The inspection team entered the medical bay, with Vexter at the head of the group. He looked around the room with obvious disdain, his yellow eyes scanning the equipment as if he were examining refuse. When his gaze fell on Murphy, his expression shifted to one of cruel satisfaction. "Ah, the human medical officer," Vexter said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I trust you have recovered from your unfortunate accident?" Murphy kept her expression neutral. "I am fully operational, Commander. How may I assist with your inspection?" Vexter moved closer, his massive form looming over her. "I have been thinking about our earlier conversation regarding human medical capabilities. Perhaps you could demonstrate some of these advanced techniques you mentioned." Murphy recognized the trap. Vexter was trying to goad her into another display of knowledge that he could use as an excuse for further humiliation. But she had a different plan in mind. "Of course, Commander," Murphy replied calmly. "I would be happy to provide a demonstration. However, some of our more advanced procedures require a controlled environment to ensure accuracy. Would you be willing to participate in a brief private consultation?" Vexter's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but Murphy could see the arrogance winning out over caution. The idea of further humiliating a human officer in private was too appealing for him to resist. "Very well," Vexter said. "But I do not have time for lengthy explanations. Make your demonstration brief and to the point." Murphy nodded and gestured toward the smaller treatment room adjacent to the main medical bay. "If you would follow me, Commander, I can show you our most advanced diagnostic equipment." Vexter looked at his security detail and made a dismissive gesture. "Wait here, this will not take long." Murphy led him into the treatment room, which was barely large enough for two people. The walls were lined with medical equipment, and the lighting was softer than in the main bay. She had chosen this location specifically because it would give her multiple advantages in close quarters. "Now then," Murphy said, moving to the main diagnostic console, "our medical scanners can provide detailed real-time analysis of most known species. For example, I can tell you that your current heart rate is elevated, your skin temperature has increased by 2 degrees, and your muscle tension indicates a high state of alertness." Vexter snorted. "Elementary observations. Any competent warrior could make the same assessment." Murphy smiled slightly. "Perhaps, but our scanners can detect much more subtle changes. For instance, I can tell you that your breathing pattern suggests you are experiencing mild discomfort from the reduced temperature in this room. Your species requires approximately 3 degrees more heat than humans for optimal performance. Vexler's expression shifted slightly. Murphy had hit on something he had not expected her to know. Furthermore, Murphy continued, I can detect trace amounts of stress hormones in your system that indicate you are not as confident as you appear. Your body is preparing for potential combat, even though you believe you are in complete control of this situation. You presume too much, human, Vexler growled, but his voice lacked the certainty it had carried earlier. Murphy moved closer, her voice dropping to a conversational tone. Commander, may I ask you a question? In all your years of military service, how many humans have you actually fought in combat? Vexler blinked, clearly not expecting the question. I have no need to waste time fighting inferior species. So none, Murphy said. That explains a great deal. You see, Commander, you have made a fundamental error in your assessment of human capabilities. You have confused our desire for peace with an inability to wage war. Murphy moved to another console and brought up a holographic display. Let me show you something that might interest you. This is a comparative analysis of human and Zephyrian military history. The display showed 2 parallel timelines. One showed the Zephyrian expansion through space, with their conquest of various star systems marked in red. The other showed human history on Earth with major conflicts highlighted in blue. Your species has been spacefaring for approximately 800 years, Murphy explained. In that time, you have conquered 14 star systems and subjugated 11 different species, impressive by most standards. Vexler nodded, his pride evident. Now look at the human timeline, Murphy continued. In the same 800-year period, while confined to a single planet, humans fought over 3,000 major wars. We perfected weapons capable of destroying entire continents. We developed tactics so effective that we nearly drove ourselves extinct multiple times. Vexler's expression was changing from arrogance to uncertainty. You see, Commander, Murphy said, her voice becoming harder, you have been mistaking our choice to explore space peacefully for an inability to defend ourselves. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was physically assaulting a human. Officer, Murphy moved to the door and activated the privacy lock. The soft click echoed in the small room like a gunshot. Now, Commander, let me show you what humans are really capable of. The soft click of the privacy lock seemed to echo in the small treatment room. Vexler's head snapped toward the door, his yellow eyes widening as he realized what had just happened. He was trapped in a confined space with a human he had just humiliated, and for the first time since boarding the ship, he felt a flutter of uncertainty. Open that door immediately, Vexler commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to instant obedience. Murphy remained calm, her hands moving steadily across the medical console. I am afraid that will not be possible, Commander. The door is now sealed for medical safety protocols. Standard procedure when conducting advanced diagnostic procedures. Vexler moved toward the door, but Murphy's voice stopped him. I would not recommend trying to force it. The door is designed to withstand explosive decompression. Your strength, while impressive, is insufficient to breach it. Murphy turned to face him, and Vexler saw something in her eyes that made his scales prickle with warning. The submissive, defeated human he had struck in the medical bay was gone. In her place stood someone who radiated quiet confidence and deadly purpose. You wanted to see advanced human medical techniques? Murphy said, picking up a small device from the console. Let me show you something we developed during our wars. It is called precision neural manipulation. She pressed a button on the device, and Vexler suddenly felt a sharp pain shoot through his left arm. His hand went numb, and he staggered slightly as his balance shifted. What did you do? He demanded, trying to shake feeling back into his arm. I activated a focused sonic pulse that temporarily disrupted the nerve cluster in your shoulder. Murphy explained conversationally. The effect will last approximately 10 minutes. Consider it a demonstration of human medical precision. Vexler lunged toward her, but his injured arm threw off his coordination. Murphy sidestepped easily, her movements fluid and economical. As he stumbled past her, she pressed another button on her device. This time, the pain struck his right leg. Vexler crashed to his knees, his powerful muscles suddenly unable to support his weight. He looked up at Murphy with a mixture of rage and growing fear. "You see, Commander," Murphy said, crouching down to his eye level, "human medical science has taught us exactly where to apply pressure to cause maximum discomfort with minimal permanent damage. We learned this during our interrogation techniques." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small vial of clear liquid. "This is a sedative specifically designed for reptilian nervous systems. 1 drop will cause temporary paralysis. 2 drops will render you unconscious. 3 drops will stop your heart." Vexler tried to speak, but Murphy held up her hand. "But I am not going to use it on you, Commander. Not yet. First, I want you to understand something important about human nature." Murphy stood up and walked to the medical console. "You attacked me because you believe humans are weak. You think our peaceful exploration of space means we have forgotten how to fight? But you are wrong about us, Commander. Dangerously wrong." She activated the holographic display again, this time showing detailed anatomical diagrams of various species. "Do you know what makes humans unique in the galaxy? It is not our technology or our intelligence. It is our evolutionary history as apex predators." The display showed a human skeleton alongside those of other predator species. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy evolved from prey animals or scavengers. You Zephyrians evolved from creatures that were hunted by larger predators. That is why you developed your thick scales and pack mentality. Murphy highlighted specific bone structures on the human skeleton. But humans evolved from hunters. Our forward-facing eyes, our opposable thumbs, our ability to track prey over vast distances. We are the only species in the galaxy that climbed to the top of the food chain through pure aggression and intelligence. Vexler was beginning to recover some feeling in his arm, but he remained on his knees. Murphy noticed his movement and casually adjusted her sonic device. For millions of years, humans hunted everything on our planet. We drove dozens of species to extinction, not because we needed to, but because we could. We developed weapons not just for survival, but for the pure joy of killing. She moved closer to Vexler, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you know what happened when we finally ran out of other species to hunt? We started hunting each other. For thousands of years, we perfected the art of warfare. We created weapons that could kill thousands with a single blow. We developed tactics so brutal that we had to create laws to limit our own savagery." Murphy reached into her pocket and pulled out the pen-shaped device. "This looks like a medical scanner, does it? Not, but it is actually a weapon. One that can cause you pain in ways your species cannot even imagine." She pressed it against Vexler's neck, and he screamed as agony shot through his nervous system. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, not the clean herd of battle wounds, but something that seemed to attack his very soul. "Stop!" he gasped, his voice barely audible. Murphy withdrew the device. "That was set to the lowest possible setting. I could increase the intensity, but I think you understand my point." She walked back to the console and pulled up another display. "This is what happened to the last species that tried to subjugate humanity. The Andromedans were much like you, Commander. They were strong, proud, and they believed might made right." The display showed images of a war-torn star system with destroyed planets and shattered fleets. "It took us 6 months to completely eliminate their entire civilization. Not just their military, Commander, their entire species. We hunted them across 3 star systems until there was nothing left." Vexler's eyes widened in horror. "That is impossible. The Council records show no evidence of such a war." Murphy smiled coldly. "The Council never knew about the Andromedans. As far as official records are concerned, they never existed. We made sure of that." She knelt down beside Vexler again, her voice becoming almost gentle. "You see, Commander, the reason humans seem so peaceful is not because we are weak. It is because we are so dangerous that we frighten ourselves. We learned long ago that our natural instincts lead to genocide and extinction. So we created laws, treaties, and moral codes to keep the monster inside us caged. Murphy stood up and walked to the door. But sometimes, Commander, someone makes the mistake of rattling the cage. Someone decides that human restraint is the same as human weakness. Someone strikes a human officer and thinks there will be no consequences. She turned back to face him, and Vexler saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. You have awakened something in me that I have spent years trying to suppress. And now you are going to help me demonstrate to your species why that was a very bad idea. Murphy walked to the communication console and activated the ship's internal monitoring system. By now, my team has neutralized your security detail. They are not dead, merely unconscious. We are very good at non-lethal takedowns when we choose to be. She showed him the security feed from the main medical bay. His 3 guards were slumped against the wall, apparently asleep. Your ship will be wondering why you have not reported in. They will send a search party eventually. But by then, you will have learned everything you need to know about human capabilities. Murphy picked up the small tube of neurotoxin cream and squeezed a small amount onto her finger. This will cause temporary paralysis of your vocal cords. I cannot have you screaming and alerting the rest of your team before I am finished with your education. Vexler tried to back away, but his injured leg would not support him. Murphy applied the cream to his throat with clinical precision. Now then, Commander, she said, picking up the sonic device again. Let me show you what humans really learned during all those years of warfare. Consider this your introduction to the concept of enhanced interrogation. Vexler tried to speak, but no sound came from his throat. He could only watch in growing terror as Murphy began to explain exactly what she was going to do to him. For the next hour, Murphy systematically educated Commander Vexler about human nature. She did not torture him out of cruelty, but rather provided him with a comprehensive demonstration of human capabilities that no classroom could have matched. Each application of pain was precise, controlled, and designed to teach a specific lesson about the species he had so badly underestimated. She showed him pressure points that could cause agony without leaving permanent damage. She demonstrated how human medical knowledge could be used to induce fear responses in reptilian nervous systems. She explained the psychological techniques that humans had developed to break the will of their enemies while keeping them alive. And functional. Throughout the process, Murphy maintained her calm, professional demeanor. She spoke to Vexler in the same tone she might use to explain a medical procedure to a patient, describing what she was doing and why it was effective. The clinical detachment was perhaps more frightening than screaming rage would have been. Your species believes that strength comes from physical power, Murphy explained as she adjusted the sonic device to target a different nerve cluster. But humans learned long ago that true strength comes from the ability to control when and how that power is applied. Vexler writhed silently on the floor, his vocal cords still paralyzed by the neurotoxin. His eyes were wide with terror, but Murphy could see that he was finally beginning to understand the lesson she was teaching. I could kill you in 17 different ways using only the equipment in this room, Murphy continued conversationally. But I am not going to do that. Not because I cannot, but because I choose not to. That choice, Commander, is what makes humans more dangerous than any other species in the galaxy. She knelt down beside him and looked directly into his yellow eyes. You see, when you attacked me earlier, you made a fundamental error. You assume that because I did not fight back immediately, I was incapable of fighting back at all. But I was simply choosing the time and place for my response. Murphy stood up and walked to the medical console. The paralysis in your vocal cords will wear off in approximately 10 minutes. When it does, you will have a choice to make. You can scream for help, in which case I will demonstrate some of the more permanent techniques I have learned. Or you can listen to what I am about to tell you. She activated the holographic display one more time, showing the current positions of the Zephyrian fleet in the sector. Your ships are out there right now, waiting for your inspection to conclude. They have no idea that their commander is currently learning about human combat psychology. But they will know soon enough. Murphy pulled up another display showing the technical specifications of the UES Liberty. This ship may look like a simple exploration vessel, but it carries enough firepower to destroy a medium-sized moon. Every human ship does. We learned from the Andromedan conflict that it is better to be over-prepared than caught defenseless. She turned back to Vexter, who was staring at the display with growing horror. Your species has been testing human resolve for months, pushing us to see how far you can go before we push back. Well, Commander, you have found that limit. Murphy walked to the door and entered her access code. The lock disengaged with a soft click, and she opened the door slightly. My team is waiting outside. They have been monitoring this entire conversation, and they are ready to act on my orders. One word from me, and your entire inspection team will simply disappear. She closed the door again and returned to Vexter. But I'm not going to give that order. Instead, I'm going to offer you something much more valuable than a quick death. I'm going to offer you the chance to save your species from making a terrible mistake. Murphy helped Vexter sit up, supporting his injured arm. You are going to return to your ship and deliver a message to your superiors. You are going to tell them that humans are not the weak prey animals they believed us to be. You are going to explain that our peaceful exploration of space is a choice, not a weakness. She checked her chronometer. You have about 5 minutes before your vocal cords recover. When they do, you will be able to speak again, but you will also carry something else with you for the rest of your life. Murphy reached into her pocket and pulled out a small injector. This contains a neurological modifier that will create a permanent association between aggressive thoughts toward humans and severe anxiety responses. Every time you consider threatening a human, your own nervous system will remind you of what happened in this room. Vexler's eyes widened in panic, but he was still unable to speak or move effectively. Murphy pressed the injector against his neck and activated it. The effect is permanent but not debilitating, she explained. You will be able to function normally in all other situations, but you will never again be able to contemplate violence against humans without experiencing overwhelming fear. She stood up and walked to the communication console. I am now going to contact your ship and inform them that the inspection is complete. You will return to your vessel and deliver my message. If you fail to do so, or if you attempt to misrepresent what happened here, I will personally hunt you down and demonstrate some of the more permanent techniques I have learned. Murphy activated the communicator and spoke in a calm, professional tone. Zephyrian vessel, this is Lieutenant Commander Murphy aboard the UES Liberty. Commander Vexter has completed his inspection and is ready for transport back to your ship. A voice responded immediately. Acknowledged, Liberty. We are prepared to receive the commander. Murphy turned back to Vexter, who was beginning to regain some mobility in his limbs. Your guards will wake up in approximately 10 minutes. They will remember nothing of what happened after entering the medical bay. As far as they know, they simply fell asleep during a routine inspection. She helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as he struggled to regain his balance. But you will remember everything, Commander. Every lesson, every demonstration, every moment of fear, and you will carry that knowledge with you for the rest of your life. Murphy opened the door and led Vexter out of the treatment room. The medical bay was empty except for the 3 unconscious guards, who were slumped against the wall exactly as she had shown him on the monitor. Your vocal cords should be functional again in about 2 minutes, Murphy said, checking her chronometer. I suggest you use that time to think carefully about how you will explain this experience to your superiors. As if on cue, the 3 guards began to stir. They looked around in confusion, unsure of what had happened or how much time had passed. Murphy moved to assist them, playing the role of a concerned medical officer. Are you feeling all right? She asked one of the guards. You suddenly collapsed during the inspection. I was concerned about a possible allergic reaction to something in our atmosphere. The guard looked confused but accepted her explanation. Zephyrians were not accustomed to being deceived by species they considered inferior, and it did not occur to them to question the human's version of events. Vexler cleared his throat experimentally and found that his voice had returned. But when he opened his mouth to speak, no words came out. The neurological modifier was already working, creating a conditioned response that would make it impossible for him to reveal what had actually happened. "The inspection is complete," he finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "We will return to our ship immediately." Murphy nodded professionally. "Thank you for your time, Commander. I hope you found our medical facilities educational." As the Zephyrian inspection team prepared to leave, Murphy walked with them to the docking bay. Captain Morrison was waiting there, along with the rest of the human crew. He looked at Murphy with concern, noticing that she appeared tired but strangely satisfied. "Any problems with the inspection?" Morrison asked quietly. Murphy shook her head. "No problems, Captain. I believe Commander Vexter gained a new appreciation for human capabilities." Vexter boarded the transport without looking back. As the ship pulled away from the Liberty, Murphy could see him through the viewport, sitting alone and staring into space with the expression of someone who had seen something that would haunt him forever. Over the following weeks, reports began to filter through the intelligence networks about changes in Zephyrian behavior. Their inspections of human vessels became less frequent and more respectful. Their aggressive patrols in human space were reduced, and whenever Zephyrian commanders encountered human ships, they showed a level of caution that their superiors found puzzling. The change was subtle but unmistakable. The Zephyrians were no longer testing human resolve. They had received their answer, and it was not what they had expected. Murphy returned to her quarters that night and updated her personal files. She added detailed notes about Zephyrian physiology and psychology, information that might be useful if future situations arose. Then she locked the files away and tried to forget about the darkness she had been forced to reveal, but she knew that word would spread throughout the galaxy. The message would be passed from species to species, captain to captain, commander to commander. Humans were not the weak prey animals they appeared to be. They were apex predators who had chosen to explore space peacefully, and that choice could be revoked at any time.